Hey everybody, I just got done felling a pretty nice pine tree and I wanted to make a quick video to show how I skid logs out with a tractor. So let me get this camera turned around and we'll get started. Okay, so here's what's left of the tree. I've skidded everything else out except for the last big butt log, and you can see the stump over here. I actually used a special cut on this tree, and one of these days I'm going to make a video about that because it's very useful way to fell tall skinny trees, but we'll save that for another day. So here's the last log, and I wanted to just show my skidding setup on the tractor. What I do is I welded up this frame with a chain hook on it, and this is used to lift the logs, get them up off the ground for easier skidding. And I've skidded as many as 3 logs behind this setup at times, but for these big guys I tend to do one at a time. I think it's super important to get that front butt of the log lifted up off the ground so it's not going to drag on anything, it's not going to catch on anything, and it also lifts pretty much the entire log off the ground so it's not going to get dirty. And that's an important consideration if you're going to be using this wood in a sawmill. You don't want to be getting that log dirty by dragging it on the ground. So it's ideal to lift the front of the log up for many reasons. One thing I wanted to point out here is that I use an actual choker hook on my chain, and there's all kinds of chain hooks, but if you're skidding logs, spend $5 or $10 and get one of these choker hooks, because these things are great. This is what they're made for. They're easy to work with. They let the chain slip when it's supposed to. They make it choke and bite down when it's supposed to, and they're just great. There's these other type of chain hooks here. Just wanted to point out, here's your standard, and I'd call that a grab hook, and then this is a slip hook. A lot of people use these when they're skidding logs, but these are just a total pain in the ass. They just don't, half the time they're doing the opposite of what you want. So for $5 or $10, if you're going to do this, get one of these choker hooks. They just work so much better. Now, one other thing I've started to do this year that I think is important is I stick a scrap piece of roofing metal under this end of the log, and what this does is it keeps this end of the log clean when I'm dragging it on the ground. If you're just doing firewood or anything else, it's not a big deal, don't worry about this. But what I had found in the past few months is I'd skid logs out and everything would be clean except for this last butt end, and it would be caked with mud and dirt, and I'd have to break out a brush and a bucket of water to get that cleaned off so I wouldn't ruin the blade on my sawmill. So what I've been doing more recently is just strapping a piece of scrap roofing metal, and that keeps that end of the log clean, and it also helps it slide much more easily, so I don't leave ruts when I'm going out of the woods. So that's been working out great, and I think that's another good trick as well. And there's a couple ways you could do this. I keep thinking if I ever spot an old well pressure tank at a steel scrap yard, you could cut one of those in half, and that would make a really good little tail end sled as well. But for now I'm using this scrap sheet metal. So that's kind of the overview. I'm going to put the camera down and skid this log out. Okay, so I'm up here near my landing. I've gotten this log out of the woods. There's one last thing I wanted to talk about, and that's safety. When you're pulling with a tractor, the safest way to pull anything with a tractor is to use that drawbar down there, because that is mounted below the axle line, and that's always going to help keep your tractor stable. And any pulling you do is actually going to force your front wheels to stay on the ground. And so, most pulling with tractors, that's where you should be doing it from. For skidding, that's not ideal. And so going to something with using the 3-point hitch where you can get that log up off the ground, that's better in terms of the logging purposes and what you're going to do with the log and the lumber and the wood and all that. But this definitely increases your risk, because if something gets hung up, your tractor is going to want to pop a wheelie. Now, that's more unlikely with a modern tractor with a HST transmission. They just have a lot of molasses basically between the wheels and the drive line and that pulling point, and you'll be able to catch that in time. But older tractors or tractors with a clutch, those things like to pop wheelies all the time, and so this would be a little bit riskier to do on those types of tractors. So if you do this, you just really have to be careful. You got to keep looking back, watch what you're doing, make sure this doesn't get hung up on anything. Make sure the log doesn't get pinched and hung up on anything, because that is going to want to make your tractor pop a wheelie if that happens. Now, one thing you can do to mitigate that is to run a second chain from your choker to clevis on your drawbar, and that'll give you kind of the benefits of using the 3-point hitch and your skidding frame to lift the log up, but also direct your pull point down lower. And so that's something to keep in mind. I think that would be a good solution if you had a tractor with a clutch or an older tractor that likes to pop wheelies all the time. If you can use the 3-point hitch to lift the log, but then use another chain to redirect your pulling force down there, or at least split some of that pulling force to go down there, that'll really improve the safety of that setup. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching.